here tonight, so let's get on. So most of you who know me know or work with me or have done some work with me in the past know that I'm a senior executive at DXC Technology, and I sit in the security space. And there's a few DXC guys and girls on the call today. And I work in that cybersecurity space, have done for about 4 years with this particular business. I'm also a professor of cyber with USQ, University of Southern Queensland. And I come from originally a military veterans background. So I served about 6 years in the Army and went on through that transition out of that space, which is a whole another nightmare, into later on a couple of years down the track to Victoria Police, and did about 13 and a half years there, and then went into federal law enforcement and then into some state law enforcement. Secret squirrely sort of doodads where you'll never see talk about. And into sort of the more the IT security type roles, and then finally into some running a global energy company's cybersecurity, and then into DXC where I'm now. And in this particular role I do now, I also pick up the veterans program. So, and this is where we sort of came to this path to be here. It's a project that the SLT and DXC asked me to pick up last year, late last year, or before. 14 months ago, around about, and we've taken that. We'll have a bit of a conversation about that tonight, and it has allowed me to open up and pretty much talk to you more openly and freely, and with obviously some street credibility about how to come into businesses like DXC, what we are looking for, what we will be doing for you as veterans on both the defence side and the law enforcement side, and how we're going to move that space. So to get us started, I'm going to flick through my screen over here because I can't see my notes over there or on the one we're looking at. So we'll tick through some things and get it going. So again, thanks. I'm going to go through the agenda. Agenda is basically the introduction we've just completed. We're going to talk about your career, how your career is over, as you probably see it, if you're a defence transitioning member or from law enforcement. An industry overview of the cyberspace and the IT space. Training, education, myths and lies, some things that you may not be aware of. We'll talk through some taking the next steps and what sort of steps you can take. And some of the guys on this call have actually started to take some steps. And we'll look at how to land safely in a workplace and what that might look like, and then some next steps for your career. So in order to start that space, I want to talk to you. So if you treat this conversation as I'm talking directly to you. So I'm actually having a conversation with you about where you are. And normally I'd have a consultancy space and I'd get some of you on the call, we'd have a one-on-one and I'd talk directly to you. So if you think about that one-on-one space, this is the way I think is probably a good way to treat this particular seminar, is a one-on-one. So particularly about you, this is not a TED seminar where I'm just preaching to the converted. There's some specific things that I'm targeting towards you each as an individual. And I want you to start to sort of sit back and have a bit of a think about, as we progress through the slide deck, about where you are in your transition or where you are in your career, and how you want to, or think you might want to, improve both your career opportunities, a transition space, and what you actually want to do. And one of the questions I ask all of the people I've spoken to in this space is, if I could give you if I could pay you $200,000 a year, what job would you want to do? And everybody in this space goes, oh, cybersecurity. And I go, man, I want to go fishing. I want to go fishing, fly fishing, pay me $200,000 a year, sit back on the rivers in Victoria and Canada and Chile and just throw my fly rod around New Zealand and that sort of space. And you could pay me $200, I'm a happy man, because that's what resonates with my soul, right? So we want to talk about, and want you to start to think about what actually resonates with you as a person, not you as I've got to work and I've got to earn money and I've got to, because there is that space, or I've got to make a career out of myself, or change and transition to something that I'm not currently now, but I'm interested in being in the future. So you might be a rifleman in an infantry battalion and you're thinking you want to be a SOC analyst in the Security Operations Centre, and you don't know how that transition works and you don't know what that job is. It just sounds pretty cool, but really there's a whole heap of hurt if you don't like that space, and you get in there and you find yourself in that workforce and you think, what the hell have I done? I don't like this. This is not resonating with me. And cyber can be like that. So the first and most important thing is you are your most important asset. And so if you step back a bit, have a think about what that means, have a think about what it means to you and what the value of yourself and what your learnings are in your education and your capability to transition through your life from job to job, and definitely out of defence and law enforcement. Second thing I want to point out is life is short, but it is certainly the longest thing we do. So it's too short to be doing stuff that we don't like. And by and large, we've all done things that we don't like to do, we don't want to do, but we have to do. And it makes the day go longer and it makes life go longer. But by and large, if we can find something for you guys that actually resonates with you, who you are and what you feel, how you think, and what speaks to you, then this is a good place to be, to explore that right now. One of the other things I want to talk about today is we are the average of the 5 people we spend time with, and that is around networking. So when we look at your network and who you hang out with on a professional basis, this is not a friends basis, this is a professional basis. Who do you coach with, mentor with, ask for advice, hang out with in, at work or in the office's mess if you're an officer and all that sort of space? So where's your peer level at and where should it be at to move into? And I'm not saying they're going to be mates, because at the end of the day, there's a whole range of opportunities that you can go through. And I'm just trying to read some notes here because here's a point I wanted to say. So what I want to continue with that space and have to think about that as we move through this particular space or particular presentation. And reinvention is your resume. So we are at a point now in our careers, and we're in a point in our social construct here where the world has changed over the last couple of years, and it's not what we thought it was, and it's not really what we thought it would be. And in the security and IT sector, we've been trying to encourage business to work remotely or give them capability to work remotely and to be able to deliver that work performance on a remote status. The COVID pandemic has actually thrown us into that space. So a lot of the work that some of the guys on this call have been involved in is shaping up how business does that. Now you have a unique opportunity. I spoke to my eldest son some time ago, about 2 years ago, and he was a builder tradie in Melbourne. And I said, this is the most challenging yet the most opportunistic time you will have in your career at your young age. It's no different for the rest of us. So we're at a space now that technology has been developed to such a state that is actually a real enabler for your career moving forward. Certainly no less than in the social media space and the connectivity space. So we are all sitting here in various cities in the country, and we're all having a conversation about cybersecurity workforce and the rest of the bits and pieces we're going to talk about. So in that space, you would jump from job to job. We've all had, and if you look at my career and my LinkedIn page, I've had a number of jobs. We've all generally, of us who've got a bit of age about us, certainly in IT, have jumped from job to job because we keep reinventing each other, and we keep training, and we keep learning, and we keep reinventing and trying to bring something new and more innovative to the business and being of value for the business. So there is that space as well. So we'll walk on to the next slide, if you don't mind. Cool. So this is one of those break slides where you have some questions. So fundamentally, the best way to get started is actually stop talking about it and get doing it. So you might have had some conversations about cybersecurity. You may have had some conversations about IT, but when we reflect on what we've just spoken about in this space or this seminar, is there any questions you guys have at the moment about, you being an asset, life is short, you're the average of 5 people, and reinvention is your resume? Has anybody got any thoughts on that? Anybody? Do I have to call you out? Because I will call you out. Okay, Matt, where you go? Matt Spencer, I can see you laughing.
Question again?
Yep. So have you got any thoughts about you as your most important asset? What does that mean to you?
It means you're going to decide where you're going to go in life. Basically work around your LinkedIn to decide what you want to do, profile yourself to a degree that you're happy with.
Yeah.
Work on yourself. If you don't work on yourself, you're going nowhere.
Yeah, I think we all agree with that. So it's really up to you now to take control of your life. And I've got a piece to talk about that later on, but there will be a lot of people that you walk with and say you can't do stuff, and we all say you can, and we want to encourage you to do what you think you want to do, and we'll help you to be there and to walk with you. So that's a very important thing. Matt, thanks for that. I'm going to reach out to another person I know is on the call tonight. We are the average of 5 people we spend time with. And I want to raise up Daniel Vincent. Daniel, what do you think about that?
Okay.
There you go.
Hello. Yeah, so 5. Come to think of it, I only really hang out with 5 people. So it's the friends you walk with. So 5 people that are going to keep you going. That's how I think of it, is that you'll have 5 key friends that will, you know, no matter what you do, you can call on them and talk to them. Mostly mine are mentors and that, so I can have a chat to them and speak my mind and talk ideas and that through them. So I guess that's what I'm taking away from 5 people that you walk with. Are the 5 people that are going to keep you strong, keep you on track, keep you and hold you accountable to what your actions are and what you're talking about.
Cool. Thanks for that. Okay, next slide. Thanks, Elise. So this slide's got a fair bit in it, and this is going to take a bit of time to get through, but we'll walk through this slowly. So we have, in our slide, we have a couple of things about your career. So effectively, and I hate to say it, but your career is over. And that's for these guys, of you guys that are in defence or coming out of defence and in law enforcement, coming out of law enforcement. So the way we used to work, and certainly in my time, when I was at school, it was get out of school, find a job or get an apprenticeship. You're in that job for the rest of your life. You're going to go through the rank structure or the promotion structure. You're going to make some money. You're going to get promoted. You're going to do good things. You're going to get married, have kids, retire, and that's it. Man, hasn't the world changed since then? Because if you think about it now, the ecosystems that we work in are really, really different. And the opportunities now are really, really different. And it's all about adding value now. The business world expects you to train yourself and educate yourself. That's what it's expected of you. If you're looking for a job in IT and security, it's expected of you that you come into the business armed with education. In fact, you won't get in the business generally without any education, and you certainly need some experience. And we'll talk about that later on. But the whole idea of transition, and certainly when I got out, and you get out of the army, and literally in my day, it was don't let the door hit you on the butt on the way out, and the police force was no different. And you look and go, man, what just happened here? What have I done, and what do I do now? And everybody experiences that level of doubt in your life. So you're not on your own. It's really a very challenging time to go through, even to the point that you can actually have that experience when you go through life and other general jobs as well. So the issues though, or the difference in the defence space particularly, is that you're coming out of that family and community that's been largely either on base or overseas or in deployment, but it's hidden away from general population. So you don't go home at night generally, and you don't go, to the university to do some study, or you don't get in the pub with your mates and hang out and go for a surf and stuff. You're generally on base, hidden away, especially the younger generation that aren't married. They're always, and they're living on base. It's a very base orientated mentality. Everything is there for you. You don't build those life skills because you're not experienced or you're not subject to those sort of experiences. So the transition comes a little bit harder. For those of you in law enforcement, that's a completely different space, but it's similar in some aspects. So in terms of the law enforcement space, in the law enforcement space, you're transitioning from a construct, and that construct is of law, defined cohesiveness, social morality, and enforcement, to a world that expected you to manage their moral fortitude. And that means they have none of their own, of course, but that means that you go to work, you are surrounded by uniform, whether it be law enforcement or first responders. You're in that space, you are motivated, educated to do that role. You go off in the police cars and you do your job, you go on patrol, you go undercover, you do whatever you need to do, you go on stakeouts and all that good stuff, kind of stuff that police officers do. And you are embedded into a very small community that is there to serve and protect, and you certainly have each other's back where you expect it to. So there's a very heavy reliance on brotherhood and sisterhood within the law enforcement sector. When you step out, the law enforcement sector has a tendency to wipe their hands of you and say, well, there's nothing as X as an ex-cop. And that's pretty hard to take for some people who spend a long time in law enforcement. Some experiences are different, and they get out, especially when you're sort of in that retirement age. The guys tend to get out a lot more, resilient in terms of their friendship base. But some guys can tend to leave the organisation under stress and anxiety, and they find it quite challenging. So no real difference in reasons to get out, just that you both find yourself in that, man, where the hell am I and what just went wrong? So we move into the self-assessment phase, and we talk about your career is over and what sort of person can I now be, and what things can make me feel valued, what resonates with my soul. So you now have an opportunity as you leave the Defence Force or leave law enforcement to reinvent yourself. And this is where we are, right? So we're going to reinvent ourselves, and we think that in cybersecurity might be a place we want to reinvent ourselves to, in the work career space or the IT sector. So very similar sectors, although very different at the same time. And we'll get through some conversation about that later on. But you need to start to think about what it is going to make you happy, not what it is going to make you the biggest buck, or what it is going to make you think that looks cool. And a lot of the people I speak to, I pushed into a website called Genius Armory, and I think I have that in later in the slide. And Genius Armory is a web page that you can go to if you're interested in cybersecurity, undertake that training for free. And then you can learn quite quickly what you actually don't like to do. And most of the guys that come back to me, guys and girls, and spouses as well, come back and say, I can tell you what I don't like. I don't like this, and I don't like this, this, and this, but I do have an interest in that. And that was actually quite cool. Okay, so we wipe all that noise aside and we start to focus on, is that pathway really what you want to do? And is it a pathway that's actually going to resonate with your work ethic, your value set, and actually what interests you as a person? So first of all, it's about re-identifying or redefining what it is you actually want to do, because it's no more important than going down a track and going, I want to be a cybersecurity guy, but actually I don't like it, so I don't do it, or do poorly at it, or I don't invest my time and effort, because there's a fair bit in cybersecurity to understand. And then we look at an opportunity space. So we're looking at where are we now in the world for opportunity? So I work at home. I have done since COVID. Our entire business has actually shifted to the home base. We had 3 offices or 3 buildings in Brisbane. We have 1 building and 1 floor now, so everything else has been sold, which is a bit of an interesting sort of take. We have opportunities to go into the client space and work with a client on site, which we do quite a fair bit. But by and large, our work can be undertaken at home, and my work is solely undertaken by home. So that's a different dynamic, right? So literally, I could probably work anywhere that had great connection, and still connect and get on and understand and do work and have our meetings and counsel and advise and do all these sorts of things. Sit down there, whack out documents and a VPN into secure networks and the like. So I can still do that. And the global influencer markets, they've all changed. So beforehand, we were looking at some social media spaces to get ahead. We're looking at some networking spaces to get ahead. We're looking at some, things like going in and having face-to-faces, going to seminars, going to meetings, doing these seminars at a face-to-face venue where we would struggle and pay a ton of money to do, but now we can do it for free, which actually benefits everybody else more so than it would going into a venue. Although the difference is we can't connect as humans in that venue, we connect as machines effectively in this space. And there's new technology innovation that's actually caught up and catching up. So there's been a big opportunity in that space that you need to realize is for you guys to take some advantage of. Social media has been redefined, how we market, talk, connect, communicate, build those social networks. And this is an important thing, especially for both of these you sectors in defence and law enforcement. Traditional law enforcement, you never had we never, I think Facebook came out towards the end of my career, but there's no way I would have had a Facebook page, and there's no way it known that if I was in some sort of those operational spaces in law enforcement, I'd ever be on LinkedIn or social media. And so, similarly in defence, if you're working for the front line, combat core type things, special operations, intelligence, all those sorts of spaces, you don't maintain or create a social media space because it's a challenge for your security and it's a challenge for the nation's security. So by and large, we used to stay away from those things. That door's now open to you. And that door is really well known to you guys. So we need to talk and have a conversation about how you get on LinkedIn, what you have to do to play the space, because you'll see on LinkedIn profiles, even though some of you guys think have said, and my wife says it sometimes, are you just after likes? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what likes really do for you. But the point about it is that there's a lot of data coming through the LinkedIn profile for cybersecurity. Every day there's security stuff coming through that you can learn about vulnerabilities and threats, the landscapes, the opportunities that come through, who's doing what, who's talking about what. Some of it's repetitive, certainly for some of the cybersecurity guys here. It's a bit, yeah, okay, next one. We've all heard about Log4j, you know, that sort of stuff 1,000 times. We're all hearing about in the business, so we kind of skip over those things. But the value of your social network and the opportunities now have risen are immense, and you need to take advantage of it. And literally it's been going for 2 years and you're now in the hot spot to make some gains on that space. In the education space, things have massively changed over the last 10 years in this space. There are new opportunities, online learning, micro-credential certifications, targeted and specific. There's industry leads, there's viable, powerful, that are viable and powerful and that are required. So we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But by and large, we used to talk about university a lot. And we used to talk about industry qualifications a lot for the cybersecurity space and the IT space. That is no more important now than it's ever been. It's actually vital, and it's a conversation piece that we'll have down in a couple of slides, but you can ask questions shortly on it. And we talk about the mission and execution. So this is rolling back to you about how do you make this transition happen? Not just a transition part, but actually how do you make cybersecurity and information technology work for you as a transitioning law enforcement veteran or military veteran? How do you build that profile? How do you undertake the learning? What do you have to do? Who do you talk to? What course should I do? Who should I engage with? Who's going to mentor me through this space? These are all questions, by and large, that you've come to here to have a talk about, and that we've spoken about with a lot of you guys in the past. And more than happy to have those conversations with those of you guys who haven't had a conversation with me for the future. And you have Soldier On and Fortem and Helping Heroes and veteran support. All these guys are here, and then most of them on the call, I haven't seen some names yet, but most of them are here to support you guys in some way or form in your space to help you transition out. So I need you to have a reflection about one particular line item that I say quite a bit, and that is certainly in the cybersecurity space, when project managers decide to, oh, well, let's engage security because we've got a project deliver and security will do this in 2 weeks, and do risk assessments and the like. And I have a great little comeback to those guys who are saying, oh, we need this done tomorrow. And I say, your failure to plan doesn't make it my emergency. Take a seat, take a number, we'll be with you shortly. When we talk about that in our world, you need to plan this stuff, guys. You need to start to come out with some skeleton plan, some consultancy, some advice, seek those who can help you out with making a plan to make this path, this transition. Without that plan, I can tell you now, it's not going to be fun. And you're going to miss a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of opportunities, and I'll give you an example. We've got a couple of guys on the call now that I think it was the day it was due, or 2 days before it due, Microsoft Military Software and Systems Academy opened up. I was late to the call because it's Office Microsoft did engagement at the time, or they told me they would, they didn't. And I grabbed 2 guys and said, you need to go on this course right now. And there's 2 guys, so there's probably more on this call tonight. There's 2 guys I know that's on this call tonight that are actually doing that full-time IT program. And that's going to lead them into a role with either Microsoft themselves, what a great brand to have on your resume, or into a DXC role or an Accenture role or an NTT role, or Infosys, or all those other big IT security type companies going around. All right, so we're going to go for our next, as you can see, our picture for some questions. So has anybody got any questions about any of those light items? Elise, can you roll back to the screen before so the guys can, thanks. So if any of those areas you want to have a quick chat about, just ask a question. Do I have to pick someone out again? I'm not afraid to use my mouse. Rightio, who we got?
G'day, Neil. Sean here.
Hey, Sean, where you go?
Just a question with regards to the work from home. Is it so omnipresent, like everyone doing it? Is that sort of how it's being done now, or is it still requiring a lot of face-to-face? Because I know certainly from a law enforcement side, we're used to dealing with people, and we'd probably lose a lot of our professional skills, and they wouldn't translate quite as well across in the remote setting. What's your thoughts on that?
So You'd be surprised, Sean. I think the biggest thing I've found is that in the law enforcement sector, the success of being a police officer primarily surrounds about your ability to communicate. And, it's either dealing with offender face to face, it's dealing with, customers, be it the crook or be it, the victims, or even just, delivering a death message. So, how you tailor you tailor your communication style and the message to that audience, unfortunately. And it always is. I remember being in an interview one day with health in Queensland, and the lady there, a bit older than me, said, "Oh, look, I really love your resume. Look, there's all law enforcement experience and blah, 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 blah." I'm like, "Oh, God, that's very nice." She goes, "Tell me about a time you had a difficult conversation." Really? So okay, when I knock at your door at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm not coming in for a cup of tea. Tipping it's all crap, and it's going to get really bad for you and not me, but it's going to be a bad time because I have to be there, right? So in this space, the other opportunity we have is actually how to communicate effectively in this medium. So all of my meetings are like this. They're either on the phone, rarely on the phone. My meeting day today is literally, and a few of the guys will test it, is back-to-back meetings in this sort of platform. And you have to really stay ahead of your skill set on terms of how you communicate, because there's a lot going on and there's a lot of people on these calls. So the strength of your communication and your influencing skills you learn as law enforcement really comes to the forefront in this space. So it is a bit of a challenge. I miss, obviously, being with people, and that's a transition that I've had to make, and we've had to make that. So that's not unusual. And I've got a couple of dogs at home, so that's cool. So I can actually get, and then those that meet me, the dogs, they're wolfhounds, they come in at this sort of level and lick and carry on and take off. But I think the biggest advantage to the skill sets you guys have in transitioning into this space is your comms. Definitely you communicate. And when you think about it, that's all we have here. We have the ability, like us, to speak, communicate. We can't exactly see and read, those indicators and cues that we see that we normally do. Body language, all that sort of stuff. It's quite vanilla. But we can actually offer more opportunity about how we describe things, how we feel. So it's more of we can start to share our emotions. We can start to say, okay, we don't know. So we start to ask more questions because I can't see. So I can see your screen now, Sean, but if I'm having a conversation with you, if you're not nodding and doing those auto cues, I'll be asking more questions. So it requires more inquiry or more, investigation. So there is that space as well, which coppers are great at, right? Defence, not so much, because defence have a very significant rank structure, which is quite different to the law enforcement space.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thank you.
Cool. Anybody else?
Looks like Chris and Matt have volunteered in the chat to have their say.
Yep, let's go. Who's up first on that?
I may not have been here because I was running after some kids, but can you repeat the question?
Have you got anything? Well, didn't you have a question for this on this? Any of these?
No, I don't think so. I think Matt shouted me out. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
All right, then
pretty sure Matt had a question though.
I think we've done Matt tonight. I might have hooked him up with something different. All right, we might move on.
Group,
Yep.
Joey, he's actually a good bloke. Joseph.
Oh, cool. All right, we might move on to the next slide. Thanks, Elise. And the next one after that. All right, let me just get rid of my screen I've got here. Awesome. All right, so we're going to talk a bit about the cybersecurity industry, and we're not going to talk to you about it in a traditional sense that you might be aware of. I know there's I've got some cybersecurity guys from DXC on that will be nodding and shaking their head a bit, so it'll be interesting to see some of their perspective. So we talk about the pillars of cybersecurity industry. So fundamentally, cybersecurity, when somebody asks me, "Oh, what do you do?" and I go, "Oh, I'm a cybersecurity guy." What do you do? And I'm like, cybersecurity stuff. Leadership stuff, advice, consultancy. We run audits and look after the business of risk and compliance and governance and things like that. So sometimes it's hard to explain. So it doesn't surprise me that a lot of you guys actually don't know what it is other than what you see in the news with some dude doing a ransomware attack or hacking something and, systems going down, and certainly with the Russian invasion happening right now with the Ukraine, the banks are going down and things like that. But the industry of cybersecurity is a little bit different. So we have a couple of pillars in this space. We have the cybersecurity business. And what I refer to as cybersecurity business is the vendor space. And that is the companies that actually go out and make and create those, what would you call those, industry tools. So the firewalls and the endpoint protection, all that technology stack, this is the cybersecurity business space, or what I'm calling the cybersecurity business space. So in that space, we'll have product developers, we'll have technical staff, we'll have designers, engineers, solution architects, we'll have a range of sales staff, which is the staff that generally come and see someone like myself. And we'll talk about what products they have. It's a sales engagement. So we're talking about what's in my environment, what's the product stack that you have, how does that product stack up with my environment, how does your product help me secure my environment, and what does that actually look like? So that particular area has account directors and finance people. It's a business, right? So if you think about that, that's the cybersecurity business in the vendor market, and that's quite large, quite dynamic. There's a lot of movement in that space. So every year, a salesperson from, say, Trend Micro will finish at Trend Micro and go and work for a sales team at Tenable, and then next year they'll finish Tenable, or 2 years later do a cycle Tenable and go to ForcePoint, and then they'll go to Proofpoint, and then they'll go to Cylance, and they'll go to Palo Alto. And the same people tend to zip around that space quite well. But there's a lot of scope to develop some really good cybersecurity skills and some good knowledge in that space. The second place I like to call the cybersecurity operations space, and this is the space that I think you traditionally think of when you think of cyber. So these are teams of security professionals, generally technical, not all, that are actively working to continually secure business IT and technology and systems. So these are the teams that I would generally run under a contract. I'd have a range of teams sitting under me. I'd have an operations team full of technical guys doing all the things, bits and pieces, like a SOC and like SISM and like endpoint and vulnerability and patching and all these different other sort of technical spaces, cybersecurity. And I'm not a technical person. This computer goes off, I call the help desk. If I need a network engineer because I don't understand the network, I'll call a network engineer and get a précis of what the network is, and then consult internally with those technical people. So this technical suite is the suite that is the most dynamic, and I think the most sought after place to be, but is certainly able to be entered at a junior level. The more time you spend in that space, obviously the more money, more experience you get, the more money you're worth across the environment. And it works that same way within the cybersecurity business space. The more time you spend into it, the more experience and more value you bring to the business, the more money that you can actually earn in that position. The other space is our cybersecurity consultancy space. Our auditors, assessors, IRAPers, ISO 27001, NIST, implementers and foundation people, and our governance risk, or GRC, governance risk compliance people. So this is a non-technical space largely. So when I say non-technical, they're not on the tools pumping away looking at a keyboard. They understand the broader context about networks and cloud and those sorts of bits and pieces, and they can actually acquire a knowledge stack about how a framework, a policy or a strategy, some legislation, how that binds together to create a cybersecurity business. So I liken that to, I guess, you have in the law enforcement sector, you'll have up to around about senior conning sergeant and constable running the streets, doing the van on the highway patrol, on bikes, all that sort of grassroots type of policing space. And these guys are the blokes that sit upstairs into the inspector or in higher rank level that are looking at how do we tie together operations? How do we manage our budget? What do we have to do with our staffing numbers, and what are our risks in that space? In the cybersecurity world, we're looking at how the business cybersecurity portfolio is hanging together, and what ISO 27001 and NIST, which are frameworks, how they operate and how we've plugged into that framework, and what are the policy guidelines and the procedure documentation that comes out of that. And the GRC space you can get into that now as a junior person. That's a common sense space. I've got to say that right now. You don't have to be a very technical person to be in that space, but you have to have a range of common sense, because it's all common sense in that space. So it's all looking at what is risk, how do you do that? Oh, Nick, I'll get back to you and say, yes, they do. I'll tell you about that in a second. So the GRC space is So for example, I'm in that space from time to time. At the moment, I'm looking at a whole raft of risk in the workplace that I'm working in, the contract I'm on, and I'm looking at how are we compliant with that risk outcome? What are the compliance in our sector? Are we meeting our contractual obligations? Are we meeting our workplace obligations and those sorts of things? So can a GRC person work remotely? Yes, they can. I'm one right now. So I'm working on a contract with South Australian Health. I'm leading a management team there. I've got 2 GRC people specifically for me, and I'm leading those guys in their GRC. So they bring all their hands-on stuff. They're remote as well to me on a daily basis, and they move forward. David, I'll open that question to you because you're in the business.
I was just going to say that some of the IRAPs and audit requirements do require on-site visits. So it's going to be a mix of reviewing documentation, but when you've got to go and look at equipment and processes, then you're going to have to go on site. So yes, probably 80% of it can be from home, but we do have a requirement to go to clients, unfortunately.
Thanks, mate. So just for those guys who aren't clear what an IRAPper is, an IRAP assessment is a federal government space where they require an in-depth internal audit on their systems and services and the like. I think it's on a yearly or bi-yearly, every 2 years. I can't remember right now. It depends on the agency, I guess. That's a specific area. Generally, you have to go to Canberra to be there, and generally you have to be quite close to the business and go on site. There's other areas, if you're working on contracts that require defence or national security space, tax and the like, you generally need to be in the space because you have different access and level of controls. I sat as a GRC consultant in the ATO for a while, and I was limited to what I could actually see. So my workspace was limited to doing different pieces to what people on site could do. All right, so the CISO, ISM, strategist and thought leader space. So it's Chief Information Security Officer, Information Security Manager, strategy people and thought leaders. That's in the more the leadership space. That's about how those people tend to manage at the chief level, and that depends on the business where they sit. Some chief levels of the information security guys sit under a CIO, Chief Information Officer, which is a massive problem. And I'll say it out loud for those who disagree. It's not where you want to be. Why would you have you're actually raising risk against their portfolio that they actually either don't want to share or want to downgrade because they don't feel they're very comfortable with that space. There's a challenge there from the outset. But in terms of being that C level, which is seen to be the pinnacle of cybersecurity, I don't think it is personally. I think it's you get what you pay for, and you certainly work your butt off being in that position, and there's no rest for the wicked. I think the ISM, the Information Security Managers, I think is a more suitable role for senior people in law enforcement and with some senior leadership qualities and skill sets and defence to come into. And also think in terms of like a company like DXC, we have this service delivery or security delivery manager sort of roles, which is about delivering that security contract to the client. Strategists and thought leaders, those guys, you can play in that space. You can start to throw out things like we're doing here about providing some thoughts about what's in the environment, about direction, new technology, new threats, how to change some bits and pieces. I guess in terms of thought leadership, I think about that as people are actually willing to put their hand up and say, I think this, my opinion is that, and they do the research on it to actually get some street credibility in that space. And it's somewhere where the universities sort of play as well. So that's sort of how I've been involved in that space. So that's where that kind of sits. I'm just going to make sure I've covered everything off. One thing I will say, right, is there's no actual single industry for this work. This work can permeate across nearly every industry. And I'll say that from agriculture to zoology or running a zoo. Cybersecurity pertains across nearly everything we possibly do. So if you're talking about Queensland Rail, if you're talking about health services, any government service, any law enforcement service, defence services, national security, making pairs of shoes, running factories, doing power, water, supply chain, all those sorts of things require a level of cybersecurity. You can be good at your job technically and have a job in any of those vectors. So the perfect job for me, for example, would be a cybersecurity leadership position, for example, in John Deere tractors. Because I like John Deere tractors. I'm a farm boy, so that really resonates with me. So, you know, you get your career in cybersecurity, then you get into the industry you actually want to have a look at working in. In places like DXC, you get to plug into a range of different vectors and verticals and different businesses, because we use you across the sector. So you learn a lot more, you experience a lot more pain sometimes, but certainly a lot more experiences about what type of risks are out there. And you can do that quite well, and you can transition across those areas. Just make sure I got my notes right. All right, next slide. Thanks. All right. In this space, we're talking about the types of cybersecurity environment. So like I said before, and this is sort of leading in this space. Generally, you think of cybersecurity as a corporate network. And I'll give you an example. Government building, government office, for example, department of whatever, has a corporate IT sector. And that's by and large what we're generally used to, or generally sort of talk about. And we talk about a business or government structures and networks. So that is a general, very vanilla sort of typical sort of space to work in. And that's by and large a range of large contracts and large businesses, your corporate sectors, down to your small and medium enterprises. The second one we want to talk about is operational technology, or OT. And this talks about things like, and relates to things like power companies and utility companies. And it broadens itself out now to be a whole range of other things. But by and large, they use different systems. They don't use the same networks and the same technologies as you would in an IT corporate network. They use SCADA, they use PLCs, they use HMI, self-healing loops, and a wide range of proprietary old technology. So an example on this one is when I was working for EDL, Limited, which is a global power company. We had 203 power stations at the time, and most of those power stations were run off of Windows XP. We all know about Windows XP. If you know anything about cybersecurity, it's very problematic. But all the technology is so old because all it does is turn a button on, turn a button off, hits a PLC, turn a button on, turn a button off. So it's, those micro switches and all that sort of space about running power stations. The problem with that space, though, is if I turn that power station off to replace that older technology, I'm out millions of dollars in daily delivery. So I actually lose money. So they're very reluctant to put new technology in. So by and large, trying to protect that technology stack is really, really challenging, and largely means that you have to actually put a barrier around that, or a fence around that, and just actually have no external access to it other than some reporting coming through about the health of your system. That's a big space to be involved in. That's a massive industry vector for you guys to have a look at. It's interesting, it really is, because you're actually dealing with the industry type and the technology type. Whereas in the corporate sector, you're dealing with just the technology type, because the industry stays the same about sending out emails, having servers deliver information, all the like. The other, one of the other areas we talk about a lot is the OIT, the Internet of Things, and largely insecure bits and pieces, endpoints, HVAC, which is your building systems, and cameras and the like. So it's a large space, and it's only been, I guess, exacerbated in terms of cyber, because it's really large and challenging to sort of get your head around. A lot of the technology that was delivered or built came without any security parameters on it. So if you've got a security camera, for example, or an IP camera, we call them these days, that's about 5 years old, then it'll largely have no internal security mechanism at all. These days, new legislation came out in the United States, and anything made in the US that's an endpoint or IoT comes out with its own inbuilt security. It's only minor, but at least there's something there. So that's another vector to have a look at. Your HVAC systems, your fire systems, your air conditioning, your power, all that sort of stuff in a building, that's your HVAC stuff. And obviously your cameras, your surveillance or your IP cameras, which is we have massive networks of those things. And that's about the protection, because they're an endpoint and they plug back in through either your cloud or on-prem, and you can bust in through your networks by just plugging something into a very loose camera. And we have both the cloud and application security space as well. So cloud, we're talking about obviously pushing your data into somebody else's server bank, basically someone else's repository for information. And by and large, we talk about a couple of things. The biggest players are onshore, offshore, sovereignty-based, not sovereignty-based. Basically, am I sending my stuff to, say, Microsoft Azure, and they're managing it for me, and there's a different security overlay for that. And we talk about, okay, can that information be held in India, which is a ton cheaper, but what does that information stack look like? Is that government sensitive or classified information? Does it have some rules and regulations and law around that? So there's a whole heap of sector there to talk about, and application security about those applications that we're using now and about how they go out. And that's a massive sector right now, because in the last couple of years, everybody's been making the applications, so your apps on your phones and the apps on your systems. You look at now with, say, Microsoft, you don't buy the Microsoft home pack anymore, which gives you your own, Office suite. You actually buy the apps you want, and it's the security of that application that we need to refer to. Same and similarly in the roles, we have all the technical space we'll talk about shortly. SOC analyst, endpoint vulnerability, networks, cloud architecture, networking, all those things that we're going to talk about very shortly. We also have the business sector about CISOs, CSOs, chief security officers, consultants, government, GRC guys, and we also have the product and sales. All those three there work in each business. So you can pick and choose, or you can decide to, look, I want to go to security sales and do your sales promotion course and get into the business security role that way. Or you can go, I want to be a security or network engineer or security architect and do the course certifications for that and step into the business that way. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, thank God for that. That's question time.
Neil, I was just going to ask, we get this question a lot, especially for police that are transitioning that don't have security clearances. For these roles on the screen here, would you recommend, a base level before they apply, or an NV1, or is there something that you think that would really support them, or is it not a need for them to have it?
It's not a need, but it's a good to have. I mean, it's a really good thing to have, especially nowadays. It's getting a little bit more topical, I think. So in that space, all the veterans, the military veterans, will come out with an NV1, NV2 or higher. Most of the police will come out with their own state-based level, but won't be federalised. So that's a federal system. So some of the guys I speak to, especially the New South Wales and the ACT police, have those NV clearance levels, and that allows them to do and talk and engage with that defined classified information, which at the end of the day, really, and all it means is that I can or I can't be involved in this particular contract or business. So I don't ask that you guys go out there and get them beforehand, because you can't. You've got to be sponsored to do it. So if you came to DXC or Accenture or any of the businesses out there in cyber, we would apply on your behalf for your clearance, and we would pay for that clearance. And then once that clearance comes in, then we could put you on the tools in that job or on the leadership in that role, or provide you with access to information. Sometimes you can get, I was made aware today, sometimes you can get exemptions. And I'm aware that, I can't remember what the department was, gave an exemption for an MV1. Actually, one of the people that works for me got an MV1 exemption. And she's a foreigner from, where's she from? Can't remember now. No, I can't remember later on.
It's usually from the Five Eyes countries that the exemptions gets granted.
Yeah, normally it was. So I just
UK, USA, New Zealand, Canada.
She speaks Spanish. I can't remember the name of the country. Anyway, it wasn't a Five Eyes country. She did get an exemption, which I found a bit unusual. But like,
it's up to the agency head.
Yeah. So like Dave was saying, it's a bit of a needs basis, I think. But she's going down her path of citizenship anyway. But there is a challenge there. But for you guys in law enforcement, that's a walk-up start. You're already cleared in terms of, if you're in law enforcement, you don't have a problem getting your clearance. Just put it that way, because they're doing the same checks that you do on yourselves, or you have on yourself, or your office has you, regardless. So if you're a police officer, then you're not convicted of a indictable offence. You don't, we do your checks anyway. We do it in law enforcement anyway on our own people, and they do it in business every 1 or 2 years. I think it's every 2 years. So there's no, it's good to have, but I can't give it to you until you're working for us, and then we can stump that up. And the stuff that Dave was saying about Five Eyes, we already have a global agreement, like Dave was saying, about I can share sensitive classified information with those countries that have a similar security level. So we still have to manage that a little bit, but actually we can actually do it under the agreement, if that makes sense. Okay, what time are we looking at? We've got another half hour to go. I'm going to press on to the next one, and then we'll have a break if that's what you want, Elise, want to do.
Yep, I think
Yep.
that's yep.
Let's go on the interesting part, because that's all just cyber stuff we talk about. So let's talk about training and education, myths and lies. So you'll all be aware that, and I probably shouldn't be saying this, probably going to skittle me later on, but do you need to go to university to have a role in cybersecurity? Categorically, absolutely not. And the other professors at USQ probably get a bit toey with me and upset with me. But the fact of the matter is that a university degree in cybersecurity doesn't give you the skills to do the job. It just doesn't. And that's why sometimes right now, particularly, you'll see a lot of degrees are now starting to introduce micro-credentialing into their degree so that when you get out, you actually have a ticket to do that. So your micro-credentialing, I'll get onto that in a little bit in a second. But the fact of the matter is you don't need a degree in cybersecurity or IT to have a job in IT or cybersecurity. That's just a fact, prove me wrong. If you have those other credentials, you'll be picked up really quick. It'll be a technical role, won't be a leadership role, but you'll be picked up pretty quick. And so number two is, should I study online or in person? Well, that's entirely up to you. I would suggest that you try to do both, but more or less, if you're learning, if this is a new subject to you, try to get online, try to get hands-on training, so face-to-face stuff, or online training with a great mentor, or reach out to people like myself and Dave. We can just chat to you about what stuff actually means what, because there's a lot of acronyms, a bit of design work that we could work through with you guys about how that sort of shapes up. So should you study full-time or part-time? That's entirely up to you. A lot of the micro-credentialing is no more than 3 months. So 40net do a 40 vet program, which is for the veterans. It's free. It's about a 3-month study program. And the reason why we do a 3 months and we focus on a 3-month study program for micro-credentialing and certificates, because it can be less than 3 months, it can be a week in some cases. But when we take a civilian off the street, we put them in defence and we train them to be a soldier like we do at Kapuka. It's a 3-month turnaround to be from civilian to battle ready. In fact, all your training, apart from those longer and arduous technical training, like training in aircraft management, flying, all that sort of stuff, that's longer and has a lot more technical space to it, which needs to be understood. Most of the battle ready training is very short and very sweet. And you come out of this study space competent enough to get on the board running. The beauty of that from you guys to defence, and certainly in the policing space as well, is you come with a high level of common sense and a high level of pragmatic approach. So you come in, look at it and go, that doesn't make sense. Let's look at it this way. And 9 times out of 10, that sensible way is the approach you take. So part-time or full-time, it's entirely up to you. It depends how hungry you are, I suppose, a job. Like Matt, for example, is doing the full-time MSSA, and Chris, for example, has been doing some part-time NSE 40 vet training. So did you do IT before security? Not necessarily. Cybersecurity is not about IT, it's about business risk, but it uses IT as the enabler. The business uses IT as an enabler. So there's a whole concept about, if I just go and do my certificates in cybersecurity, I actually don't need to understand the broader IT infrastructure space, because my role is pretty much vanilla down in this particular point. And you might do a course in endpoint or SOC or something like that, and you won't be engaging with the broader business. You'll be dealing with logs and information coming in from SOC or coming in from endpoint, and you won't be going out looking at Active Directory or what's a network look like, what's a cloud instance look like. It'll be very focused in that security space. So where do you go to get this information? I've got a link for you later on that you can look at that gives you an understanding of the training stacks. Not all, but some. And by all stretch of the imagination, there's some things coming up that we can't give out quite yet, but in the near future that Soldier On, the USQ and DXC will be launching up that would actually provide a lot more interest, I think, to you all on this call. What's the cost? Well, most of these courses, if not all these courses, are free for military veterans. Now, for the police guys out there, not so fun at the moment, but I am working with, and I did grab an email just to give you an indication of who I've had conversations with in the last couple of weeks, and now it's gone. Anyway, I was working in conversations with the likes of Microsoft, Google, Palo Alto, Juniper, their firewall people, Fortinet in their space and the security, VMware, Cisco, Adobe, Citrix, and a few other big names in our IT and security space to provide the police members on this call and other police obviously members with free training. So I don't really think that we should be arguing about free training, but if they're going to give it to one, my opinion is, of course, being on both sides, is that we should probably share the training across the deck, because it's not about where you come from. You both areas of the community have service areas have put their life on the line for the sake of the country and the community. The argument is that you should have access to that training space, because generally you don't. So in defence, you're either at work, you don't know what you're doing tomorrow by and large, or you're deployed, or you're overseas, or you're on base, and you can't go to the university every night because you don't know what you're doing every night. So you're restricted by that. And the law enforcement guys are literally, it's rotating shifts all the time. So there is ability to study, but there is impact from the day-to-day grind of law enforcement, what that it means to your soul and your state of mental health. So there's those two. So for the guys in law enforcement, hold your breath for a little bit. Something's going to come out very shortly. For those in defence, everything's free for you guys. Do you study technical leadership and management certificates? We'll talk about in a sec. We'll go on with that. But yes, do both, depending on where you are and what you want to do. We'll talk about where they fit in a second. I'm not technical. How can I work in this environment? I'm not technical. I work in this environment. We learn the technology as we go through. You learn new things every day. And I'm not on the tools. So there's teams that are on the tools. So for example, Matt, who we spoke to earlier, he will be on the tools doing technology. He'd work with a manager. The manager would most likely work for someone like me. And I do this strategy and oversight and delivery services and the thing like that. And who can help me is these people on the call. So if you're looking for more assistance in this space, talk to the Fortem guys, speak to the Soldier On guys, speak to the Helping Heroes, and speak to the veteran support guys in that. So Nick, you raised your hand.
Hey Neil, sorry, I was
Hey,
trying
all
to unmute myself. Now I just have a question.
Yep.
So you're speaking about technical roles and on the tool roles. Now, is there a way to start in a non-technical role and then going, oh, actually, I'm interested, and going into a role that is more on the tools, more technical, basically? Is there a way to, how can you go around that? Can you go around that?
Yeah, you
basically?
can do. So I haven't got a specific example for you, but in a business like, and I'm going to reflect on DXC pretty heavily here, right? Because DXC is a good place to start your sort of space. Like the bigger companies have a lot more capability to move you around. So if you started in DXC as what we used to call account security officer, which is exactly where I started, right? If I started in there, which is now a security delivery lead, and I've moved to consultancy, so I'm actually on a completely different team. I do a completely different job. If I wanted to go to the tools, DXC has a massive library of study. There's I think like 1,200 security courses you can do that DXC supply for you for free. So you can go and do the technical study. You put it in the DXC land. You put it onto your what's it called, Dave? Workplace or Workday? It's your personnel file.
Yeah. You have your professional development that you include discuss with your manager, and you include that training development as part of your professional development.
Yeah, so you can be sitting as an ASO, for example, which is a largely non-technical role, and you can say, I have an interest in being network engineer or project manager, or even in the IT space, you might go, I actually want to go and learn that space. I've been doing the study. This is what my professional development is looking like, and literally DXC will move you into a role like that, like a technical role. So you can go from one to the other, or go around and try it out. I mean, I don't think you need to be in these businesses and think you're only a network architect or a security architect for the rest of your life. And this is the beauty about cyber. It's so dynamic and so innovative that literally every week something new comes out in the cyberspace that we all sit there and go, how the hell did that happen? Or how does that work? And how do I pull that into my business? And then I have, the chief level guys ask me, hey, Neil, what about this? And I go, what are you talking about? Oh, this new thing that's going on. Let me go back into DXC, research it, get the advice, come back to you, provide you with the update, because there's so much churn, right? So you can do, Nikki, you can be whatever you want to be.
I was thinking around a lot of the large companies have the leadership courses included. You know, for example, you know, we take the lead training that we do in our organisation. So, you know, you can do that leadership training from within the organisation in a lot of cases.
Okay, that's wonderful.
So it's about getting a job, right? Pretty
Yeah.
much. Get
Yeah,
you
and
in, get you going.
Yeah, no, that's very versatile. Thank you.
Well, it's career management, I think, too. So, you know,
Yeah.
you've got to, this sort of say, you find something that you can get that resonates with your soul right now, get in that study space, get connected with us. Let's get you into the workplace. And then we need you to settle, which we'll talk about very shortly, which most of you know about who've spoken to me before about our program that I've built up for DXC. And then there's a whole mentoring space that can guide you on this moving forward. Okay, next slide. Thanks, Elise. Let's find mine.
I can bring that website up too if you want, Neil. That helps.
Yeah, just let me just read off this a bit and just give the guys a bit of an insight. So we've mentioned these things before, right? So industry certification, Microsoft, Cisco, Google. That's 5 of, like, you know, 200, so to speak, companies that build technology both in the IT and the security space. What I wanted to give you a brief on now is very quickly is the IC squared over here on the left-hand side of the slide, ISACA, SABSA, and ISO/IEC. So in this space, it's the certification space in terms of your professional space. So those in cybersecurity understand this really well. And this is sort of, you'll see people put their names up on LinkedIn and stuff, and they'll have CISM behind it, like it's a degree or something, or like it's a badge of honor or something like that. And some of these courses are actually quite challenging in terms of not so much a course, but actually getting the certificate. So all of these require you to do at least a week's full-time study, or 4 days to a week. I did the first one. I've done the CISM, which is probably the most senior of them all here. And it's about the manager or the manager's role, and talks about 4 key areas of cybersecurity. The biggest one being business, interesting enough, not technology, because none of it's technology. Business program management, risk management, and one other which I can ever think of. And then you go into the more technical space with the fourth one down, the Certified Information Systems Security Professional, which has a very technical flavour to it. The Certified Risk and Information Systems Control, the C risk, another very technical flavour to it. NIST, which is a program. No, Dave, it's not. CISM is higher, probably because I do it, and I probably don't bother doing my CISP. Either way, these are the certificates that are really great to have. So with this place, you can do the study. It takes about 4 days to 5 days to do. You can do it online. You can do it face-to-face. I did mine face-to-face because I really wanted to make sure I got my head around the stuff. And then it costs you about $1,000 to do the exam. So it's about $4,000 to $5,000 all up for each of them. Now, when you think about that though, when you go into, say, seek.com and you're looking at security jobs, you'll see CISP, you'll see the CISM, you'll see those acronyms behind, you know, nice to have or must have. So they're your industry certifications. Now, the thing about industry certification, for example, with the CISM stuff, is to get the CISM, you've got to do the exam, the exam, and then you have to do 5 years in the business doing that stuff. So you actually have to prove that you've been doing those 4 towers for 5 years, and you need references, and you've got to sign all this documentation. If you don't have that 5 years down pat, they will give you an associate certificate, which means that you're working on getting that full certificate. You're not quite there. You may have done 3.5 years or 2.5 years or 2 years or 1 year on that progression to get that certificate, and you're not there. So the fact of the matter is, really, you've got the certificate. So you've got the knowledge, you just haven't got the years of practice that gives you that. And most of those certificates there, apart from this stuff, require around about 5 years. And I could be wrong because I'm not up to speed with them all individually. So to do that, mind you, like I was speaking to Nikki the other day, she's looking at, I said, look, go and do the CIS stuff through, I think it was Charles Sturt, I think, from memory. They were doing a free package there. Yep, thanks, free package there. She did it. Nikki's got a big thumbs up to that program. It taught her a ton of stuff, which is awesome. It was free, which is even better and Nick is a veteran's spouse, so she qualifies for the veteran space as well, for the veteran training. So if you're in the veterans land and you have a spouse looking to be employed and in this space, same with the IT space, this training is available to you at free cost. And I think moving forward, we'll see a lot more of that coming out in the law enforcement space. So with that, you have IC Squared Osaka. They're the organisation or the organisations effectively that run these different qualifications, and they're all international, and they're all well embedded in the industry. You can't really say, oh, look, I'm gonna go onto some backyard place and try to do a security certificate and think that's going to get through. These are the main players in the environment, and pretty much you need to abide by their rules and regulations. There are CPE points, CPE points, like you have to do, once you qualify and you get your certificate, you have to do a range of seminars, public engagements, perhaps papers and all that sort of stuff. Anything you can do that sort of works towards the knowledge sharing the space is counted towards a pointage type of system, and you apply for those points. I think it's every 3 years. I'm not quite sure, but I think it's every 3 years from memory. I can't remember the last time I did mine. Okay, so that is that deck right there. So we're going into the next one. Next slide, thanks.
Could I just quickly talk on the vendor training?
Yep.
Just 30 seconds. A lot of organisations, and ours included, have a partner relationship with a lot of these companies, and they come to us and say, hey, we want to train you guys in Palo Alto and provide I've actually done FireEye and Palo Alto training and Fortinet training paid for by the company, because we implement those solutions. So I want people trained up in it. So you can get that training provided at no cost through the vendor relationships, depending on the organisation you're working for.
Yep. So unfortunately, you have to be in DXC to get that, right? That's the only.
Accenture, DXC, IBM, they all have the relationship.
They all have, yeah, they all have the same thing.
I was trying to keep it neutral.
No, it's okay. So with that one as well, I've spoken to the Palo Alto guys and the rest of those guys that we had on that list there, and they're all willing to share that information, that training with you guys in both the law enforcement and the defence sector for free, even when you're not employed by DXC. So we are working something up in the veterans program that DXC runs. Now, the veteran program, I just wanted to make clear for you guys, it's not solely about getting people into DXC. There is a whole program we'll talk about shortly, but it's not solely about that, but it's about getting veterans jobs. So if you come to DXC and you find you can't land a job in DXC, our program will actually help you connect with those other areas that are looking for workers. It's about landing you guys in work, both on both sides, so law enforcement and the military space. All right, so I think we might take a break, Elise, for 5. Anybody can get up and stretch their legs and do what they need to do.
Yep, come back at 9:20.
Yep,
4
cool.
minutes.
And then we'll close off.
Yep. And maybe
Awesome.
you can speak to Brady's point after when we get back.
Yep, let me have a look at that. Okay.
Hey, Neil.
Yep.
Mate, I don't know if you want to answer this with everyone else around, but the question I was sort of been resonating with me a little bit is how do you find your transition? How was it different from obviously going from defence out of police? So I've had the, I guess, luxury of seeing both sides of things, even if it's for a little bit, but I do see a lot of similarities in that transition process where a lot of people find themselves struggling in police. Wouldn't say like each service have it easier or harder, but I feel like they pose their own challenges leaving, especially that camaraderie part. So, I think it'd be really nice to hear like your experience coming from both sides of both sides of it all.
Yeah, mine was a fun time. a bit about my background. So I when I joined the army in '88, which is a long time ago for some people, it's a long time ago for me. I went into the 1st Armoured Regiment. I joined the army because I joined the army. My brother was in the Navy, and there was no jobs. We had a recession on. This is the recession we had to have back when you blokes, some of you blokes were actually not even born, I suppose. But anyway, so there was no jobs. We went off and I went to agriculture because I came off a farm, so I went to study ag. Then I went to, there's no money in ag, of course. Went on the cattle stations and I still love my agriculture, don't get me wrong. And then I went and joined the army. And when I got in the army, I actually wanted to be an MP because I wanted to join the police force. And so I had a very interesting space. Went through Kapuka, and it was literally lost by 1% to the next guy who got the MP gig. And I had to go to an arms corps because you had to go to an arms corps to go to the MPs in those days. And I got into First Armoured Regiment, so I was in tanks, which I actually loved. I thought it was the best thing in the world, right? And the other guy who beat me in that percentage rate actually was killed. Lived. When I say killed, he died 8 times on the way to hospital. He was in Singo doing his infantry because he had to go to infantry first. And they were doing M1023 grenade launching practice, and the A-Res did it. Yep. They didn't count their grenades. One of the grenades was lodged and didn't detonate, and they didn't count it. And the guys went down there after doing their exercise. And the guy who was in my room at Kapuka put the boot into the car, just kicked the car, as you do, grunt, put the boot in the car, boom, this thing dislodged and went off, dropped 8 of them. So saved by the bell, I think, on that occasion. Anyway, so I went to armoured. I did that for about 2.5 years. I still wanted to chase this policing career because I knew I wasn't going to be in the army forever. And the first thing I said when I was in the army is my experience is that never get married in the army. I never wanted to have it's just shit sandwich, right?
Yeah.
But so I got out and got into the MPs and did that and hated it every day of it. There's a lot of reasons behind that. And I got out pretty ticked off. In fact, pretty ticked off, yeah.
I think jaded's the word you're
pretty
looking
jaded, yep. There's a few paybacks coming on because when you become a policeman, you have a bit more authority to do different things.
Yeah.
So I got out and had about 2 years of transition hell. Well, I had no idea, man. There was no, and this space didn't exist. So it was traditional workplace. And I did I had to go back to school to do my education stuff to get my comprehension and my spelling and all that stuff back up to speed. Because spelling's not really thought after sort of training exercise in defence. And then got accepted at both New South Wales and Victoria Police on the same day, effectively. This is when the Royal Commission into police corruption in New South Wales is going on, and I accepted the Victoria Police job because it paid better. And about 2 weeks later, the Royal Commission findings came out and they paid their coppers down there about double what we're paying in Victoria Police. I've gone, missed out. So that was okay. I went down to Vic Pol. I did 13 years. I was very lucky. I did some awesome jobs down there. I was standard, 2 years in probationary, 2 years on the beat. I did about 3 years in traffic. I wanted to be a traffic cop. I always did. I'm not a car nut, or I don't care about vehicles. It wasn't even driving fast. It was just I just like traffic. Anyway, so I was a jury killer. So I went down the traffic. They gave me a motorbike within the first 6 months because they liked me, which is unheard of. I got a bike for 3 years. I was taken off the bike or asked to come off the bike and run the Commonwealth Games security overlay for the games for traffic, transport and comms. So I worked with military there as well, and ASIO and a few other squirrely people, which was a 3-year gig. That was awesome. And I went on to internal affairs, and then I was in IT projects as a acting sergeant for a while, and then made acting senior sergeant into Crimtrack, federal law enforcement, took a gig with those guys, and then transitioned from state police into federal law enforcement, not federal police, right? Man, I got to tell you, I regret the day I did it, but not for the reasons I think. The public sector space for me was an incredibly corrupt space. Literally the stuff that we were locking coppers up for breaching, data integrity, they were doing on a daily basis. So there was so I left on the value space and found myself again, what the hell do I do now? So that was a challenge as well. So I just did what I did best, is try to adapt and overcome, this sort of sector to actually try and get some understanding. And I had no idea what cyber was about, and it was all new for me. And I just got lucky because I was working in projects. I was managing security projects, large for Queensland Health, and one thing led to another. I got a job as a security architect, which I wasn't qualified for, but I had a good sense for policy direction and frameworks. And when that job and built that entire business up, its security portfolio up from scratch. And then again, challenge of ethics, a company got bought out by China. And then DXC knocked on my door and said, hey, come with us. And it's been a very interesting time in DXC, because DXC is not like anything else I've ever worked in before. It is really a different space. But I'll get onto that in a sec. Actually, is everybody back? I think most of us will be back. I'm going to run over some things right now. So I'm going to next slide. So we're talking about our next steps, network connectors, ESOs. So let's talk about that quite briefly. So first thing, cover off this slide, you can see the 4 logos there for the guys that basically have helped sum this up and supported me in producing this particular presentation, you guys, and to have a chat. First thing is age is no boundary. Now we have a couple of guys on the call that sit in a more senior age group, nothing wrong with that, just that then brings more experience to the table, that are transitioning from their policing roles and their defence-based roles. And I've got some senior people that to the rank of the general space talking to me now about how they would transition, because they're now, you know, you come to a point in your life where you go, I can actually change whatever. This is from the very start we spoke about today, right? We can actually do what I want to do. I'm not bound by who the army has made me to be or who the police force has made me to be. I know, you know, Gordon's in this space that he's in Queensland, he's retiring out. He has to retire out because in 60, you have to retire when you're 60, which I think 60 is kind of still can get started, right? So you can still change your life at 60 and you can still become an expert at 60. So for Gordon particularly, he's had to focus on, you know, the fact that age is no boundary. And we've got some young guys in, like, you know, Chris, for example, and Nikki, who are young and got a young family. They're starting in this transition space. So it's really great to see both ends of the spectrum come together and both ends of the rank structure too. So we're talking about senior defence and senior police officers, junior defence and junior police officers, that you guys are in the same bag together. There is no rank in cybersecurity. I can give you that right now. We all listen and try to help each other. And that's one of the biggest things I love about working with the guys in DXC is that, you know, people ring me. I had one guy who ring me yesterday wanting just to, hey, you'll know about this. What's this question? I went, oh, this is this. I'm not sure about that, but this is what I know about this space and this is how it works. So we all work together, right? Because nobody knows cyber. I don't care if you're a professor like me or you're, you know, a great solutions guy like David Eddy, who's spoken up a few times from DXC, and David knows his stuff, don't get me wrong, but none of us together, we know 5/5 of nothing about cybersecurity in terms of the whole complexity of the world of cyber. So we all work together. Dave and I actually work quite closely at times to talk about the new stuff coming up, how we solutions and stuff, what we can do in some security overlays and the like. So the next thing is become the expert in your space, right? So if you want to pick a tunnel to go down in the technical space or go to the GRC space, Nikki, if you want to go in that space, become that expert. Now, my challenge is you to just go and become that expert. The only person stopping you is you. And the only person who can make you succeed, again, is you. The companies aren't going to make you exceed. Nobody's going to hold your hand with this. It's up to you to become that expert. And leverage your talent. You have guys, everybody in this call, doesn't matter where you come from, everybody on this call has talent. You have expertise, you have experience, you have life skills, life experience, good times, bad times. So traumatic times for you guys and ladies. I've had it as well. I pump on a chest on a 6-year-old last week and she died on me 3 times in the last Wednesday. Life throws curveballs at you every day. Leverage your talent, please. If you don't do anything else, just do these things I'm asking you to do because it'll save your life. So get certified. Start the pathway. If you're in doubt, let me know. You'll have my details shortly if you don't. And plus, most of you got me LinkedIn anyway, so reach out or get on a call. Get certified so you can get a job in cybersecurity, so you can start your pathway in your transition, so we can look at getting you jobs. There is a ton of vacancies going across the entire deck of cybersecurity, as you all know. Now I want to talk to you a bit about getting online and commenting. Those of you guys that work that were, I guess, came through the social media. We are going to go over time, guys. I'm sorry about that. On the social media space, know that you know, you have Facebook and you have LinkedIn and like, but get active on there, right? Because once you get active, you start to see a big world. And get online too. Get on, and we can talk about this offline. But get onto YouTube, research your LinkedIn, you know, what you can do on LinkedIn, because it's a weird beast. It changes every week. And I've got a specialist on the call. I think Elise is our little specialist friend from Fortem on the call.
No, our Queen's not here, but we'll do a special seminar just on with her. That's with Lauren.
Okay,
Soon-
well, let's
soon
stump
to
that up,
come.
eh? Yeah,
Yeah.
let's do that. So we'll put out a call the next couple of weeks about getting on a call about LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is a very powerful tool. It changes every week and nothing's the same every week. So it's always dynamic. You've got a profile to build, and because we're all working from home, there's a lot of reliance on profile, and there's a lot of reliance on networking. So you need to build your network, guys. You need to, and a lot of you are, this is part of the network space you're in. So we'll have a list of people. So I will email you all individually over the next couple of weeks to see if you want to be part of a more broader sharing group. And if you do, then we can start to talk about things in little groups, and we do that every now and then. I know Matt and Chris and a few of the other guys, we organise about an hour every couple of months to talk about how they're going, what they're doing, and the likes of stuff. So let's get on with that. Learn and ask. So if you've got questions, I saw some comments. Let me just find this comment. I had a bit of love. I do remiss. I'm not explaining what a PLC is, but somebody said, "Oh, I was just looking for what a PLC was." I just saw it in the comments, so I had a bit of a giggle. I went, "Oh, I'm sorry. I should have told you what that was." Yeah, ask a question. You're only going to know when you ask, right? Get on Google, have a look at it, find out what it is, get the context of what that looks like, and connect broadly. There's a big brotherhood and sisterhood sitting here right now that can literally shape your career just on this call. So my advice to you is, all of you, even if you have jobs, you're in recruiting, or you're in the company or other companies, media and the likes, there's a very big brotherhood, sisterhood here, just sitting here to help each other. And that's what we did in service, and that's what we do out of service. So that's our community, and use the community to your advantage. There's a lot of people on here on this call. Like, I'm sure that Dave on our call, you've heard a couple of times, would be more than happy to share his experience with you. He's incredibly knowledgeable, well respected, and has a lot of, he's got a really good heart for helping people out. Okay, so on that, let's go to the next slide, because I know we're going to go over. We're going to talk about DXC's program. So I can't get rid of that little thing that pop-up you put up. Hang on. Okay. It's about 14 months ago, DXC asked me to shape up and start this veterans program, the DXC veterans program. And I said, "Oh, what do you want to do?" And they said, "I want to do something about PTSD." And I went, "Let me go and unpack that and find out what that actually means to me and everybody else." Upshot it is, I came back and said, "This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to run it." So basically, I'm the boss of it, I suppose you might say. So we have a vision, and our vision is to enable veterans to thrive in the workplace. The workforce, which doesn't mean the workplace. That's a different thing. Although we do have workplace things here. And to become an employer of choice for the armed service forces industry. Now, when we say armed forces industry, there was contention about that. I said it's going to be armed forces industry because that includes law enforcement and the emerging management sector. So I want to make sure that that's included. And the approach we're taking is we'll work with veteran support groups, as we do, in partnerships and partners, to deliver programs that support transitioning veterans, their communities, and provide veterans in the workforce. Our approaches and actions are focused on 4 strategic pillars, which we'll talk about right now. Right, so in the veterans program in DXC, the whole premise was if you're a veteran, either wherever you come from, when you come into DXC, you have a safe landing page, and that you are actually supported. So in DXC, we've got a policy from the States that says we will interview everybody who's a veteran. If you put in for a job and you're a veteran and you tick the box, which there isn't at the moment, but there will be for Australia very shortly, that you'll get an interview for that role, regardless. And in the interview, you'll also have someone like myself who's a veteran and in the job, and there's a ton of these guys around that probably aren't on the call tonight. So that's the whole group that sit behind this. Is about 30 people. Some of them are on. So there was someone like me sitting in the interview with you. So we have a standard 3-person panel. We might be interviewing Matt tonight, and I'll be there. And my role there is to act as adjudicator. What's the word I'm looking for?
Facilitator.
No, what's a dude?
Interpreter?
Language guy.
Interpreter?
Interpreter. I interpret your language or the police and military language to IT language or security language. So you'll say, oh, I've done this. And I go, okay, that means he's done that. And this is where his strength and weaknesses lie. Okay, so there's that. So we have this pillar called attract, transition, and retain or train. Let me get on my screen so it's a bit bigger. And that's about developing a capability to attract, transition, onboard, upskill, and retain veterans in the workplace. That's our commitment to you as a veteran. And our high-level objectives is increase the number of veterans that we have in our workplace, because all of you bring a very unique skill set, and a skill set that you literally can't buy out there. It's hard to replace years of training and years of experience with someone who's a graduate, because you can't do it. You guys bring a ton of you're mission focused, you're goal focused, you can communicate, you've got common sense, you're pragmatic. I wasn't talking about you, Matt, stop shaking your head. You're pragmatic. I am joking, mate. And you bring a whole heap of grind and grit to the workforce, and we want that in our workforce. And every workforce wants that, right? So you're very employable across the sector. In our culture, diversity and inclusion space, we establishment of a Veterans Employee Resource Group. We've already done that. And I think, I don't know who's on the call, Kush is on the call, but Kush is part of that, I believe. And we have a Veterans Calendar, and we foster cultural awareness within DXC and around the veterans. So what we do in that space as well is we make sure that that the business is sensitive to where you come from and what you've done for the country and the community, and what you bring into this space. So we have developed, and we're still developing, a cultural awareness package for all managers to be trained in, so that when they hire someone or bring a veteran on, they know about you, they know what to pay attention to. And we know that we've developed safe spaces and briefing rooms that you guys can go and have a bit of a chat with when you're frustrated, because you will get frustrated because it's a new environment. We want to make sure that you can have that outlet. We'll give you a mentor for 2 years. So you're mentored in the business for 2 years. And that's all about your career and training and opportunities. Nikki, like what you're saying, you want to change jobs. We also give you a buddy that works you through the whole pay system, performance management system, how to log on, multi-factor authentication, all that sort of day-to-day grind stuff. In our wellbeing and support tower, we have the establishment of the appropriate wellbeing support program for veterans. We leveraging existing frameworks, both internally and externally. So fundamentally what that says, or what that means, is that when if you're just a normal, I guess, non-veteran person in the workplace, and you have a cause or a desire to go to what we call EAP, which is your counsellors, and we all do that. And I can tell you, I've never been so much counselled than I was in the police force after every incident that I went to, and voluntarily, because you just need that time to go and speak to people, right? So we don't send you to EAP, we actually send you to the likes of Open Arms, who actually understand your background. So I don't want a graduate psychologist speaking to you as a veteran of 30 years in the military or special operations group or whatever you may come from, to speak with some graduate out of university who's done a psychology degree. I want you to speak to someone who's actually going to give you, thanks Dave, give you actually some real benefit and understands you as a person, understands your history and what you've done. So I'll make sure that that actually happens. And we do the commemorative day, say all your Anzacs and the like. We don't actually touch Anzac Day because it's a day I find that we go and spend with our people, because it's a public holiday. We've already made those arrangements with our own brothers and sisters. But all the other days, like Remembrance Day, we're doing something with that this year. So that's their days at work. So we're doing the timeouts. So we're going to go and commemorate those sort of activities. I'm not sure if Afghanistan's that's kicking off, so we'll do some stuff on that day. We also take time out and we go, you know what, kind of think today, Friday afternoon, it's 2 o'clock, righto, let's grab all the veterans, let's go for a surf, or let's go and shoot some arrows and do some archery, or let's go to the gun range and shoot some rounds. It's all about that. Let's get out of here, because there might be 1 or 2 of us that aren't feeling so well because we've been triggered by something, or we've got some PTSD kicking in, or old mate sitting next to me is legs falling off his stump for 3 times in a row, and he's just got sick and tired of it. He wants to get out. So we just go and look after our own people. And the fourth one, which is around the business. And And this is about how we market your positions for further business. So we actually use, this is quite a big area, and this is where we get our funding for this program from effectively. And what we do is that when we have bids for contracts, we make sure that there's a veteran component. So if the New South Wales airport's going up, for example, down in Sydney, we make sure that we contract at least 10 veterans to start in that role. That's 10 new veterans. That's not veterans already happening. That's you guys sitting on the call, police or military. So we'll bring you guys in, we'll build you up into the business, and we'll put you into those contracts, which means you go from whatever wage you are on now as a grunt, for example, to something around about the 100K mark or similar. So there's some advantage in that space. So what we're trying to do is it's kind of twofold. We're trying to enhance the veteran's experience, so your experience as a veteran, certainly with those of you with spouses and children. And it's certainly if you guys are coming out of places like Townsville where that the spouse is not working, and there's a high heap of stress and anxiety when you resign from the law enforcement, from the military space, and you have to take that whole family up, lift them up and move them and place them down and start again. And you've got no coin, there's no income coming in, the family violence kicks in, drug and substance abuse kicks in, wellbeing payments go up, and I've spoken to Daniel on the call quite a few times about how we would look at actually funding out some research to bring that all together and look at what the return of investment is by giving your spouse a job. So if you've got a wife or husband sitting at home at Townsville and the serviceman is off overseas in Afghanistan or wherever, or Russia or wherever we're at the moment, wherever it might be, serving, comes home, we want to employ the stay-at-home mum or dad into our business. It's all remote work. So we want them in service desk, project, change management, anything you'd like to be in, we'd like to get you in. We'd like to give you great wages, great people, weird systems, but get you in that space so you can actually, give back to the community, give back to your family, buy a house. When husband or wife comes home from service and goes, look, I'm putting up my hand, I'm tapping out, then you can move to that place of peace with your family, knowing that he or she staying home can work from home and the veteran can settle into that transition space and look for another role for themselves. So that's very massively important to me and to my veteran cohort in DXC. So is there any questions on that one? I'll just ask for questions right now because we're about to end on that particular slide deck you're seeing right now.
Chris has got one for you, Neil. Can two of the same family members work within DXC?
Yep, absolutely. We have a few of them, I think, Dave. Don't we have a few of them? No, we have a few. They work on different contracts in different parts of literally, one could be working for the South Australian government or one could be working for Queensland Airport, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I can't think of anyone offhand, but there's certainly no restriction on it. I've tried to get my son a job a couple of times. And it was not frowned upon. He just wanted to get into pen testing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Anybody else got a question on that, what the Veterans Program looks like in DXC? Yep, Chris.
Thanks for that, Neil. I just wanted to know what would be the best way to get into pen testing? Like, I know it's quite hard to get straight into it. Would it be more beneficial to get a bit of experience within DXC first and then transfer over to that sort of red team area?
Dave, I'm going to hand that to
you. Yeah, I was just, sorry, there you go. Google is your friend in that one. So you could start very carefully and looking at available tools and doing some research. But being very careful, because once you start playing, you don't the AFP knocking on your door, which we have had once because for various reasons. So I always think it's good to come in with some knowledge and being able to talk intelligently around it. So I think you can do some research and get some basic skills and knowledge of what the tools are and do and what they're available. There's a lot of freeware available. In fact, Tenable Nessus is available for everyone to use. So that'd be a good starting point.
And Tenable is one of our partners too, Chris, so
Yeah.
I can hook you up with those guys quite quickly. Okay, James.
Yeah, just a quick question about the cloud security guys. Are
Yep.
they specialised in one vendor, or do they have to have knowledge across all the big players? In
I
one?
can talk to that.
Me too, but you go.
I'll go first. I have a CCSP, which is a cloud certified security professional. It's from the ISC squared. It backs up my CISSP, which is not very valuable apparently. But generally the cloud certifications are vendor agnostic. If that answers your question. So a lot of the knowledge can be applied, whether it's platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, applications as a service, like salesforce.com. They're applied, whether it's Google Cloud, Azure, AWS, they're relevant in that. So the certifications are vendor agnostic. But as my work has relationships with all three cloud providers that I've mentioned. So we solution in all three areas.
So just to add to Dave's answer, I have a little analogy about how that all works to me. And this goes across the deck for all the towers, all the bits and pieces you might want to study in terms of cybersecurity, and it goes to the IT sector as well. So there's no difference between, doing those certs for IT, because you can easily get into role. And I think project management roles are well suited for police officers, certainly police officers, and military guys. And certainly a lot of those, the mid to higher ranks, not supposed to high ranks, but the mid rank guys are very good at and very experienced in the projects. But in terms of that, I look at this and go, it's like driving or getting your car license, right? You get your manual license, for example. You can drive an automatic or a manual, and you jump from your Holden Commodore that you learned to drive into an Audi, and all you have to do is go, right, it's my familiarization of that vehicle. So what you start with is you get yourself sorted, you get your seat straight, you do your 21-point check. Oh, this is all police talk, right? All your stuff, your mirrors, yada yada. Where's my indicator? What's that do? How does that work? What's that power button do? Okay, let's me familiarize with the widgets and drive off and get a feel of the vehicle, then drive it like a madman. If you went and did a Palo Alto firewall education certification, and you went straight from that certification into a Juniper firewall business, same stuff, different widget, just familiarization, because the engines largely drive the same, but you'll be able to pick that up quite quickly. And besides that, if it's a DXC job, we'll certify you in that technology stack they're going to work with, so you'll have both quite quickly. So there's really no disadvantage. There is an advantage. One advantage is you come in with some good grounding, right, and some good knowledge. We can leverage your knowledge and willing to learn to put you on a different pathway. And you might do it for a year and go, I don't really want to do that now. Maybe I want to go and do this, and off you go. We'll go and train you in that space, and then you can do your own training online, which is completely free. All right. So in order to wrap up, some summary items, I just want some takeaways for you guys today is that research the environment and make sure that you know what you want, what you don't want to do, and look at and don't want to do and look to please your soul. So my point about that is that, and most of you that I've spoken to, or those I have spoken to, know that I'll put you onto Genius Armory, which I think is having a bit of an issue at the moment, the website, but we'll find out. That's a good website to go in and have a crack at that space and see what you don't like to do. It's not for everybody, because basically it's a tool set, right? But if you want to do GRC space, then that's a different area. Get in contact with me, have a chat, and we'll put you into some space of that. But it's important to know what you don't want to do, because there's a whole, that opens the world to possibilities then. Because as soon as you write off that, I'm not interested in this stack over here, I want to follow this pathway, it stops you wasting your time and getting disenfranchised. And wasting time could be 3 months of training you could be working with us at. So cyber is about managing business risk and not technology. So cyber is a business issue, right? It's not a technology issue. You use technology. We work with technology. It's the enabler, but it's not about technology. And your non-technical skills are always or as a value as your technical skills. So your ability to communicate, your ability to think outside the square, the experience that you have in leadership, in policing, in other law enforcement vectors, in everything you do. We have an amazing array, not just in DXC, but amazing array of people come from just all sorts of backgrounds in cybersecurity. There's people I sit with that are like way older than I am, have this amazing diverse background, or come from foreign countries to completely think the world is never what I thought they'd live in. It's a valued mixed cultural construct, and it's really dynamic. In fact, most of the people you sit with, it's like the United Nations. If you sit down at the meeting of 15 people, it's the UN talking to you, because you get people from all over the world in this space to solve these problems together, which is really cool. Engage in micro-credentialing training and industry certifications. That is a must. If you want to get a job, you've got to have that. My advice is, if you want a university degree, you can go spend your time. I'm not saying that don't do it, because you can do it and get into a different, more, I guess, because it's more around research and industry parameters as a whole. Largely that information is a little bit old, but this technical micro-credentialing is always on point. It's renewed every year. It's up to date. It's CPE points. And like Dave said, CISP is a great place to start, because you get across to both the technical and non-technical space, whereas the CISM is a non-technical space. And network and build your connections and your community like a madman, woman. So we can talk about that later on as we go through. So in closing, last slide, thanks, Elise. That's not me. The words are, but the bird isn't. It's a nice bird though. You can obviously get me on LinkedIn there. You can contact or shoot an email through to Fortem or through Soldier On. I'm an ambassador with Soldier On. I'm on the Industry Advisory Council for Fortem. I'm in DXC. If you want to reach out and sit down and have a chat about your specific issues, or I guess place where you are in your world, I know a lot of guys have, you're more than welcome. It doesn't cost you anything. You might drive me insane sometimes with the same questions, that's okay. But my goal is to get you into a place you can actually transition safely from where you are in defence and law enforcement, and into a career that you can actually settle in for the rest of your life and actually find some value in it. And I think it's a good place to be. And I think this is a very dynamic place. There's a lot of people that want to use you and your skill sets, and that want to take advantage of what you bring to the table, and don't underestimate yourself just because you might be a chef or a truck driver. I've got chefs and truck drivers talking to me. They're as equally as clear and concise as guys coming out of signals and the like. So that's me, guys. That's the presentation. I'm sorry I've gone over time. Thought we might. So before we go, have you got any questions you want to close with?